Anxiety. If humans have developed a high level of curiosity, it is not unexpected that anxiety due to unfulfilled curiosity would arise. Humans and some other animals encounter different levels of fear and anxiety in their everyday lives, and anxiety occurs more frequently than curiosity is stimulated. Furthermore, anxiety reactions appear to have longer durations and can sometimes escalate into depression or serious neurological issues. This may be due to the impact of far more factors on the development and continuation of anxiety responses, surpassing what was anticipated. Considering this, it is necessary to investigate the origins and definition of anxiety, not just from a philosophical and psychological perspective, but also from a deeper biological standpoint. Do all living organisms experience fear and anxiety? What is the reason for the development of anxiety responses in organisms? In addition, what is the biological significance of fear and anxiety? The palpable and the unpalpable. Fear and anxiety are inevitable psychological responses in our lives. For instance, individuals may encounter diverse levels of apprehension and unease before or during a public speaking event, an interview, the evaluation of their performance by others, or meeting a significant person. In severe instances, muscle tremors, rapid heartbeat, and other tension-related sensations may be present. The presence of anxiety in human beings is easily noticeable. Our empathic mind can acutely recognize signs of anxiety in others based on our past experiences, enabling us to more easily experience or observe symptoms when we or others around us are anxious. The anxiety-inducing concern and experience of our own and others' anxiety reactions in human society is a cognitive process. In a way, anxiety enhances the thinking abilities that were developed by our ancestors in ancient times. Due to the abstraction and complexity of language and the tendency of people to consciously inhibit or mask their anxiety levels in the presence of others, there are varying standards for perceiving anxiety. It is difficult to formulate a single definition of anxiety, but it is possible to establish some agreement on its prominent features and descriptions. First of all, fear or anxiety should not be confused with the startle response, which is an intuitive reaction that does not lead to a sustained alteration of brain function or behavior. Instinctive reactions occur swiftly and dissipate quickly. They are manifested in the release of certain body chemicals, intense focus, and corresponding muscle movements. It is only after experiencing persistent and repeated stimuli such as shock, threat, and social frustration that our perceptions can become distorted, leading to frustration, anxiety, and agitation. Additionally, the human brain exhibits patterns that can both exacerbate and alleviate anxiety. The use of language and thought processes by the human brain allows for the development of more intricate connections between pieces of data, leading to the formation of imagination and logical reasoning. Nevertheless, mental models may vary from person to person. Individuals who are cognitively straightforward and naturally optimistic can suppress or eliminate mild fear and anxiety by dissociating themselves from it or shifting their thinking perspective. On the other hand, individuals who are cognitively confused and pessimistic tend to make connections with excessive unrelated information, thereby complicatedly escalating their emotions and aggravating their anxiety. These two types of individuals are always prevalent in society, and with more complexity and variability in the environment, the population's anxiety symptoms and response patterns become increasingly diverse. Finally, anxiety is manageable. Broom and Wegner, psychologists, studied the situations that trigger anxiety and concluded that people can manage anxiety symptoms by controlling their perception of the situation. Given that anxiety and curiosity are both biological in nature, can we observe anxiety in animals as well? Does the response of animals to anxiety differ based on species? Kierkegaard stated in The Concept of Anxiety that animals do not exhibit anxiety, as the nature of animals are not qualified to possess a soul and therefore any anxiety that may exist. In reality, we do not observe dogs and cats becoming metaphysically obsessed with their anxious feelings or demonstrating an awareness of such feelings. Anxiety is a common phenomenon in the animal kingdom, as evidenced by some observations and studies, and it affects not only pets but also other animals. Laurel Bratman, a science historian, describes numerous anxious gorillas in zoos, including a bonobo that exhibits symptoms resembling obsessive-compulsive disorder and performs a series of rituals before eating, as depicted in her book, Animals Are Crazy. Furthermore, Bratman's book portrays the aquarium's star performers, walruses and sea lions, exhibiting repetitive self-inflicted violence, as is typical for these animals. During a long-term stress experiment carried out for psychotropic drug research, mice were confined, shaken, isolated, exposed to a hot hairdryer, subjected to overnight bright light, and kept in cages tilted at a 45-degree angle. The results demonstrated that, similar to humans living under high pressure for extended periods, the mice became notably anxious and lost interest in engaging in exploratory behavior, resembling depressed teenagers who hide under the covers to escape from stress. The term anxiety is seldom used by researchers to describe the animal's emotions. The majority of studies describe anxiety-like symptoms and concentrate on behavioral rather than emotional aspects or the expression of feelings instead of the feelings themselves. However, this may not be true. The fact that anxiolytic drugs can alleviate symptoms in animals implies similarities with what we refer to as human anxiety symptoms. Yet, is the anxiety in animals a result of conditioned fear, or does it belong to a different category altogether? Conditioned fear is induced by memory and is not precisely the same as anxiety. Conditioned fear is a basic emotion, while anxiety is a more complex emotion with multiple neural connections in the response process. Anxiety often manifests as associative fears, where multiple complex factors repeatedly trigger fear responses that do not have a specific object of fear. The inmates of the anti-human Nazi concentration camps were subjected to constant chastisement, whippings, food control, dark and austere living conditions, death threats, and the experience of witnessing the mutilation of others. These artificially created fear factors resulted in trembling, panic, and collapse among the prisoners, similar to the mouse experiment mentioned earlier. It was the combination of these artificially created fear factors that ultimately led to the development of anxiety disorders in them. We do not have access to the subjective experiences of animals, and solely observing their behavior is insufficient evidence to label them as anxious. However, Jaak Panksepp, a neuroscientist at Washington State University's College of Veterinary Medicine, has demonstrated in his most well-known study that rats emit high-pitched, inaudible vocalizations akin to laughter when tickled. Panksepp also applied intense stimulation to the amygdala, hypothalamus, and periaqueductal gray matter in the brains of animals, which emulate the core of the human fear system, to trigger fear and then monitored their reactions. He discovered that when an animal's fear response is triggered, it enters the fight or flight state and attempts to constrain the emotions in the present, which is akin to making a conscious effort to deactivate the fear mechanism in the brain. The animal's mind is opaque, and there is no existing method to observe it. However, Panksepp speculates that animals similarly undergo a form of contemplative worry. This is because in animals, there is sufficient gray matter in the same brain regions that we recognize as governing human cognition and fretting over the essential queries of existence. Biologist Howard Liddell conducted several studies on animal neurosis using sheep as subject. Liddell discovered that when a sheep anticipates electrocution, it becomes alert and suspicious, almost as though questioning what is happening. The sheep was prepared to act, but lacked a clear direction for its actions. Liddell concluded that animals lack anxiety in the same sense humans do, but instead experience a relatively primitive and simple emotion referred to as alertness. According to Liddell's experiments, sheep can anticipate dangerous situations for approximately 10 minutes, while dogs can do so for about 30 minutes. This experiment illustrates that animals undergo similar confusion and anxiety as humans, although this might not be evident considering the apparent differences between the two. This phenomenon is comparable to the discrepancy in anxiety response between infants and adults. The origin and nature of anxiety. It is conceivable that the first task of the first life on Earth was to forage for food and take in energy from the environment for its metabolism. At that time, life must have been very vulnerable due to the threat of entropy increase everywhere and the constant need to fight hunger. If the environment continues to be poor, and it becomes challenging to obtain the right energy, a natural feeling of anxiety will drive it to make changes. According to the mass-energy equation, all matter in this book is considered an energy complex, and all matter in the following is macroscopic energy. To illustrate this point, consider the following analogy. Just like a small ball on the plane of a table, anxiety can be seen as a driving force. Gravity causes the ball to move towards the Earth due to the force of gravity. This state of impending agitation arises when needs are unmet. The anthropomorphic concept is intended to aid our understanding of the original reason for the existence of life, as fear and anxiety are closer to the essence of life than curiosity. The use of this concept is not intended to mislead our thinking. Ignoring this concept would render any discussion in life sciences meaningless. The induction of anxiety may align with the information gap theory of curiosity that arises from a need gap. According to psychoanalysts Sigmund Freud and Otto Rank, birth trauma stands as the prototype of anxiety. As per Rank, the fear of leaving the mother's body during birth, which includes the danger of losing one's life and the trauma of separation from the mother, is the archetype of all anxiety. The traumatic experience of being separated from parents repeats itself for individuals as they become independent and individualized after birth, for instance, weaning, attending daycare, going to boarding school, traveling alone, living independently, etc. Death marks the ultimate separation from life and the world. Therefore, anxiety appears to arise from two fundamental levels, survival and attachment to the mother. The birth trauma implies the infant's anxiety when these two needs are unfulfilled. Are there any other sources of anxiety, apart from survival and attachment? The concept of the sex drive plays a central role in Freud's anxiety theory. Freud applied the notion of the sex drive to research on prepubescent children, despite its lack of direct correlation with anxiety. Nonetheless, applying Freud's theory to adults results in a more plausible explanation. The desire to reproduce can impact anxiety, a phenomenon that can be universally experienced after sexual maturity. However, further discussion is unnecessary in this context. Furthermore, reproduction at the population level and individual survival are generally not mutually exclusive. This justifies changing the primary source of anxiety from survival to reproduction-based survival, which is more appropriate. Can we speculate whether reproduction-based survival and social connection are the two essential needs for survival? The former is so essential that there is no need to discuss it further. The latter, for social animals like humans, is unthinkable since we can hardly survive for long periods of time in total isolation without social connections. The movie Space Traveler depicts Jim and his companions embarking on a space journey with the hope of settling on a colonized planet. Jim awakens alone after an accident. He discovers himself stranded in a desolate, chilly world, isolated in a hopeless situation, robbed of his envisioned future. Despite being well stocked with provisions, the absence of emotional contact among individuals due to the confined setting led to Jim's intense anxiety after 1 year. Under such circumstances, it is unsurprising for one to experience agitation and apprehension. In such a situation, the desire for companionship is strong, as Jim's hope rekindled when he saw Aurora, and he was instantly relieved of his loneliness. This is why Jim woke up confused and lost control. Thankfully, there is a robot bartender on the ship, and Jim can establish a rudimentary connection with it through human language. This is how he managed to barely endure his first year of loneliness. The British Channel 5 TV once aired a program called In Solitary, also known as the Loneliness Experiment. 5 volunteers with different personalities and backgrounds were chosen by the staff to simulate a socially isolated environment in a container located in an abandoned factory that was cut off from the outside world. During the 5-day experiment, every participant experienced feeling of loneliness, and some even had symptoms resembling a nervous breakdown. It appears reasonable to associate the findings of the adult loneliness experiment with the complex organization of the adult psychological structure. As early as 8 months of age, humans start to respond to complicated social relationships with opposition and anxiety. According to child rationalist Renee Spitz, the start of this self-psychological structure is termed 8-month anxiety, also known as stranger anxiety. Babies form basic ideas of safety and regular patterns of connection with their parents through interactions involving caregiving, which are further reinforced beyond 8 months. At this stage, the abrupt entrance of an unfamiliar person into the peaceful and serene world of an infant arouses apprehension about their security and the unease that follows when their routines are disrupted. The cognitive structure and social connections formed over time result in more robust psychological stereotypes in adults compared to children. Isolating and completely changing an individual's life state abruptly can create a huge need gap, severe anxiety reactions, and may lead to physiological disorders. Do newborns exhibit anxiety when making connections? Spitz's research yields a positive answer. Newborns who are abandoned at birth lack the nurturing interactions necessary for sustained development in the nursery. Although their physical needs can be met, their interaction with others, especially their mothers, is significantly less. As a result, they usually become depressed, withdrawn, and frail. If emotional starvation lasts for over 3 months, the synesthesia of their eyes weakens, resulting in their gaze becoming dull. According to Spitz's records, the infants grow more and more lethargic, spending their days lying motionless in their cribs and even denting their mattresses with a groove. By the time they turn 2, 1/3 of the children will have passed away. Survivors are typically unable to sit, stand, or speak by the age of 4. The degeneration can be reversed if the mother returns within the first 3 months. Do other animals experience separation anxiety like humans do? Dogs have been known to display significant behavioral agitation when initially separated from their owners. This response can include profuse drooling, barking, and biting of their owner's pant legs, particularly in puppies, where the anxiety can be more pronounced. Harry F. Harlow, an American psychologist, performed a controversial experiment on rhesus monkeys. To prevent cross-contamination of diseases among the monkeys, the researcher placed the newborn baby monkeys in a separate feeding cage, away from their mothers. During this period, Harlow observed that, despite not being hungry, the baby monkeys often stared aimlessly into the distance while clutching at the towels in their cage. Next, Harlow created soft cloth-covered flannel monkeys to serve as surrogate mothers for the baby monkeys. It was not surprising that the monkeys preferred the flannel mothers over their real ones, as they felt more secure and less fearful in their company. This experiment shows that a weak connection does not fulfill the essential need of life, and a strong connection is necessary. Even though the baby monkeys were separated from their mothers, there was still a weak connection between them that did not offer enough security and comfort. The interaction between baby monkeys is not comparable to the nurturing interaction between them and their mothers. This interaction is more similar to the interaction between Jim and the bartender robot. Anxiety is prevalent in the animal kingdom, ranging from fruit flies to mice and even crayfish. Despite vast differences in brain structure and complexity across species, the gene LEF1, which recognizes nerve cell signals, governs most of the emotion regulation process. The key variation among species lies only in the specific nerve cell signals that LEF1 recognizes. In a study conducted by the University of Utah, it was found that anxiety is directly linked to a brain gene. The experimenters removed the LEF1 gene from the brains of mice and zebrafish, which resulted in them displaying increased levels of anxiety. Zebrafish typically hide from predators when experiencing anxiety. After removing the LEF1 gene from the fish's brains, the fish barely avoided predators and remained quietly underwater without regard for their safety. The evidence suggests that various organisms have evolved in diverse ways over billions of years, yet all still share anxiety genes inherited from a common ancestor. As species diverged, natural selection enabled different organisms to develop distinct anxiety response mechanisms, which could be linked to the type and expression of enzymes regulating the mode or severity of such a response. If anxiety is caused by two of life's essential needs, reproduction-based survival and strong connection, then why do we typically dislike anxiety? Additionally, why doesn't anxiety produce the same positive effects as curiosity does? Before seeking answers to questions, it is essential to comprehend the relationship between evolution, curiosity, and anxiety. To aid in understanding, curiosity can be likened to the bow of life's evolution, while genetics serves as the arrow, and mutation determines the direction in which the arrow is pointing, ultimately guiding the course of evolution. In order to launch the arrow and achieve evolution, enough force of anxiety needs to be built up to pull the bowstring. In Berlin's curiosity experiment, the experimenter was not interested in graphs that were too complex. Is there a link between this reason and the pull of anxiety? Both complexity and uncertainty consistently affect survival based on reproduction and strong connection, with the latter being particularly significant. Increased complexity and variability in the environment typically result in higher levels of anxiety. As anxiety grows stronger, so does the feeling of being pulled. Nevertheless, excessive complexity and variability can be limited by life mechanisms that reduce this pull. Limits exist in all things. This phenomenon is more evident in humans compared to other animals. Strong connections between humans are the most difficult to achieve due to the excessive complexity of language and thought. As a result, humans have the strongest need for connection, experience the most frequent and significant occurrence of anxiety responses, and undergo tugs and pulls that have been shown to be more evolutionarily prominent than in other organisms. However, this overcomplexity has also had a detrimental effect. In other words, we have to frequently cope with the anxiety response, which can be physically and mentally exhausting, leading to an aversion or even hatred towards it. This is a common and important misconception about anxiety, which poses a risk of undermining the positive impact this life mechanism has had on humans, despite its successful functioning for billions of years. This can make it challenging to address anxiety in a balanced manner. Our aversion to anxiety often stems from our improper approach towards it. Some people resort to compulsive behaviors to immediately reduce anxiety, lacking deep thinking. This approach can lead to obsessive-compulsive disorder in the long run. Procrastination and avoidance strategies can cause procrastination disorder if used for an extended period. Some individuals rely too much on medication to alleviate anxiety, which can lead to the opposite problem and result in depression or even suicide. Individuals with good mental models can send specific messages through the brain to inhibit the overexpression of enzymes associated with anxiety. Humans and other organisms may possess a similar function, but not every individual can discover an appropriate mental model. According to Rollo May's book, The Meaning of Anxiety, the original purpose of anxiety was to safeguard cavemen from wild animals and hostile neighbors. Today, anxiety presents in a different way. It makes us apprehensive about losing in a competition, feeling isolated or unwanted. However, anxiety still plays a crucial role in safeguarding our existence and the values we identify with. Unless we are willing to sacrifice our sensibility or imagination to the point of apathy or paralysis, anxiety will continue to be a norm of life. From the previous zebrafish experiments, it is clear that moderate anxiety is biologically meaningful and enables animals to reach their potential and overcome crises. This also applies to human beings. For example, many engineers, entrepreneurs, and artists need to operate under a certain level of anxiety in order to transform it into creativity. Depression and self-deception. If anxiety deepens further, the body has another mechanism to suppress it. That mechanism is depression, or more precisely, a depressive reaction. Depressive reactions usually exhibit prolonged and persistent depressed mood, which is significantly more intense than necessary. There is also a lack of self-confidence, which triggers avoidance of crowds and even feelings of guilt. Affected individuals experience a significant decrease in physical energy and slowed perception of time, and are unable to enjoy any pleasurable activity. These disorders can also cause somatic dysfunctions, such as sleep disturbances, overeating, and hyperalgesia. A curious phenomenon of depression is its tendency to be less prevalent in sunny, warm climates and more common in sun-deprived, cold climates. Could the origin of Homo sapiens in warm Africa be related to this? Although it may seem far-fetched, it is possible because Homo sapiens is not native to cold regions, but rather a pure migrant species. Despite humans creating warm materials and tools, the cold weather still diminishes the time spent outdoors. This reduction leads to a decrease in the frequency and strength of connections. This situation is also reflected in the response to seasonal depression. However, the strong cognitive abilities of humans can largely overcome many constraints imposed by climate. Climate is just one of many factors that can contribute to the onset of depression, which has a specific biological meaning. Therefore, is it accurate to categorize depression as good or bad? Numerous theories exist regarding the evolutionary function of depression, and one of the most widely accepted ideas at present is the analytical thought regurgitation hypothesis. Paul Andrews, an evolutionary psychologist at McMaster University, and Anderson Thompson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, have thoroughly elaborated on this hypothesis. According to Andrews, the physical and psychological symptoms of depression seem to create a structured system that manifests in anhedonia, i.e., loss of pleasure in most activities, increased time spent in contemplation, deep inability to address pain, increased ability to analyze certain types, and prolonged sleep during the rapid eye movement phase of memory consolidation. Andrews posits that these symptoms present a non-random combination that challenges evolutionary design. Indeed, it is questionable why a single disorder would cause such a synchronized set of responses. As the author states, this design aims to direct our attention beyond our day-to-day endeavors towards the examination or resolution of the underlying cause of depression, such as failed relationships. The author suggests that if something is amiss in one's life, it is essential to confront and address it. The author argues that although the confusion and overwhelming thoughts that often accompany depression can lead to an overestimation of one's struggles and a sense of devaluation in life, it is crucial to break away from daily illusions and concentrate on solving underlying difficulties. This explanation may be misleading because each organism has developed a unique self-repair mechanism based on its metabolic processes. Apart from the natural cell death, organisms can encounter different hazards, threats, and injuries at any given time. The lack of the innate self-healing mechanism can be detrimental to life. Similar to other illnesses, depression can undergo spontaneous remission where the body heals it on its own, halting most instances of depression. The cause of depression can be linked to the continuous stimulation of unfulfilled needs. When there are persistent unmet needs, the body's repair functions may malfunction for a short period of time. This might result in the disorganization of the mind, decreased levels of dopamine, increased activity of enzymes related to brain functions, and decreased levels of neurotransmitters that are related to sleep. Strictly speaking, though, depression might be directly associated with the body's ability to tolerate anxiety, which is a response that triggers when anxiety reaches or exceeds its limits. According to this reasoning, such a reaction should be considered a normal response for an organism. The perceptual system actively blocks some sensory connections to nerve centers, which diminishes the reception, transmission, and processing of external information. The brain reduces its ability to process complex information and enhances the ability to process stimulus-related information in order to help focus and expedite the repair of the disorder as promptly as feasible. To aid understanding, we provide an analogy of a factory with a customer-centric focus. If the factory receives multiple orders from different customers within a short period of time requiring an expanded range of products, then the production facilities would continue operating under their existing manufacturing model without intervention from the manufacturing management system. Consequently, this situation is likely to lead to a shortfall in material supply, inadequate production capacity, frequent switches in assembly line work modes, a mismatch between inventory and demand, and reduced logistics efficiency. Furthermore, if any key components in the production process fail, this would result in significant disruptions across the supply chain, shop floor management, logistics, and customer relations, and could even cause severe paralysis. In this scenario, the most effective initial measures are to limit product variety, decrease overall production, reduce production speed, balance the inventory ratio, or potentially halt certain production lines. The body possesses a well-calibrated system for curbing anxiety progression before the onset of depression, known as self-deception. Self-deception appears to stem from the mental model or the acquired explanatory system. A notable inconsistency exists in the human mental model, as we have a tendency to both pursue and resist information. We have developed a perceptual system that is capable of elaborately perceiving the external world. Apart from visualizing the world in 3 dimensions and exquisite color, we can dynamically learn and construe non-random patterns and obscure laws to cautiously present a full picture of the reality. However, upon receiving this information, we tend to disregard some of it, misinterpret it to align with our biases, and even deny factual evidence to ourselves. In addition, we suppress unpleasant memories, create false recollections, justify our errors, pursue activities that boost our self-image, and internally justify our sense of self-worth. What is the explanation for this behavior? This behavior could be viewed as unethical, deceptive, and potentially harmful to both our mental and physical health. However, the underlying reasons for consciously manipulating and distorting information in this way are unclear and require further investigation. Why do natural selection mechanisms create our perceptual systems while permitting selective distortion of the information received? In summary, why do humans deceive themselves? Certain evolutionary scientists have attempted to explain this phenomenon through co-evolutionary competition among living organisms. Numerous other species have developed a distinctive array of deceit mechanisms to evade natural predators, generally with the purpose of surviving and reproducing, and competitors have evolved comparable mechanisms to deceive. The persistent rivalry between the deceitful organism and the deceived one propels the co-evolutionary process of both. The argument put forward is that self-deception evolved primarily to deceive natural enemies, improve deceptive abilities, and learn deception skills through continuous self-deception practice. This reasoning may appear reasonable, but when the target of deception differs, the methods and outcomes are entirely incongruous. Consequently, the same method of self-deception employed for deceiving natural predators not only fails but can even have negative consequences. For instance, squids are known to be the chameleons of the underwater world, since they change their skin color quickly through the use of luminescent and pigment cells to avoid being preyed upon by predators. Assuming that a squid self-deceives itself into thinking that predators cannot find it, even when they are nearby, it will continue to swim calmly and make no preparations to avoid being captured. In this scenario, the squid's self-deception will inevitably lead it to become the predator's prey. This tendency is also true for human beings. It is possible for individuals to knowingly engage in deceit and to comfortably misrepresent the truth to others, even when they themselves do not believe what they are saying. However, it is difficult to convince oneself of what one does not believe. Self-deception is the only way to make oneself believe something that is only partly believed. Thus, acquiring the ability to deceive oneself does not always result in successfully deceiving natural predators. It is possible that in humans, self-deception is linked to psychological expectations, as well as higher rates of survival and reproduction. Self-deception can often result in psychological benefits such as feeling better or happier, which can lead to physiological benefits. Happiness leads to better bodily function, increased immune efficiency, improved cognitive processing, enhanced survival chances, and more mating opportunities during sexual selection. At first glance, this explanation seems reasonable. However, if comparative pleasure was the direct purpose of evolution, why did only humans develop the instinct for self-deception? If self-deception is not unique to humans, then all creatures should behave happily. According to this theory, the animal world should be like the song and dance scenes in cartoons, where rabbits, possums, and penguins happily enjoy the pleasures of life, singing and dancing, laughing, and sharing joy within and between populations. However, we don't observe animals behaving or looking happier, and they only seem a little more relaxed when there is no danger. Furthermore, even if animals desired to be happier, it seems unlikely that they would use the uncertain and potentially costly mechanism of self-deception to control their level of happiness. Self-deception incurs a cost, and engaging in conscious falsehoods results in severe consequences in most cases. For instance, when accidents occur, relationships break down, or careers fail, we resort to self-deception instead of seeking self-protection or problem-solving, and attribute the outcomes to fate, divine punishment, or bad luck. As a result, the cost of self-deception is disconnecting from reality and facing a higher risk of harm. If self-deception was unique to humans, they would be perceived as the most cheerful and pleasant species of all creatures. However, that is not the case. There is a saying that life is not always as it should be, implying that common human emotions are not always biologically pleasurable. On the contrary, anxiety due to dissatisfaction is more frequent and common. It is possible that the causal relationship between self-deception and comparative pleasure is reversed due to the fact that self-deception lowers anxiety levels and provides us with more reasons and opportunities to find pleasure. There is an established biological basis for high levels of anxiety in humans. Accordingly, self-deception can be seen as a pre-protective mechanism of the body that works to avoid depression in a manner similar to the effect of a placebo. Superstition is a classic example of a pre-protective mechanism. Superstition has been prevalent throughout history and across multiple cultures, from ancient tribes to the present day, including practices like Chinese feng shui and Western astrology. Superstition is prevalent in various degrees across different professions and classes, as well as in both Eastern and Western societies, from remote mountainous areas to modern metropolises, regardless of education levels. Individuals tend to believe in mysterious arguments when they are uncertain and lack knowledge about a particular subject. Individuals are more likely to be superstitious when they lack control over their future. Among professionals, gamblers, sailors, financial brokers, and others display higher levels of superstition. Some individuals may engage in daily rituals or uphold specific objects that they believe can attract good fortune, while others may seek guidance from practitioners such as witches, exorcists, or clairvoyants, which are not uncommon in society. The numerous and complex unpredictable influences can cause mental anxiety that needs to be channeled and alleviated. People naturally seek psychological support for self-deception. Although not entirely solving the issue, it effectively reduces the anxiety response.